Well, what isn't widely known is many of what I now consider ordinary things about vitamin D, because we still have this widely known question
Sure.
that you put in there. Most people still don't know the basics.
Well, at least within our audience.
I know
Our
what
audience
you-
is a little
I
more
know, I'm
educated.
sorry.
And maybe you can even expand on that, because our audience is a significant subset of your 8,000
Yes.
people enrolled in your
Yes.
trial. And interesting, maybe just comment on that now.
Let me tell you a little
Yeah.
bit about your audience.
Yeah.
You put out a call to people last year sometime to enroll in this project, and a number of people did, and I'm very excited about that. And what was interesting, or what is interesting, is that we track many things, but one of the things we can see is, okay, what's the average serum level of the first-time test, all right? Well, the average serum level of the first-time tester, or how many people are below 40 is really what I wanted to address. Mercola people came in with fully 40% of that group below 40 nanograms per milliliter. But out of our whole population, it's more like 50%. So the Mercola people that were coming in weren't high enough yet, but they were taking supplements and doing something to get, that you could see that there was something going on. And by their second test, the Mercola group raised itself up higher than the average group did by the second test. So you already have a beautiful group of listeners who are paying attention.
They are paying attention, and
Yes.
they're benefiting.
Yes, they are
because
benefiting.
my passion, and the
Yes.
reason, one of the primary reasons I
Yes.
started the site is to,
Yes.
to take this
Yes.
leading edge research that
Yes.
the scientists are just so
Yeah.
frustrated they can't share the message, and to provide an audience for them so
Yes.
they can devour that applied and get the
Yes.
benefits.
Yes.
So, it's a little bit different audience, the people, because they like to get that, and there's a certain
Right.
need for it. So is there anything you could offer to this audience that
I
they may
don't
not?
have anything brand new today other than what I've already talked about. I
Okay.
think the things to watch out for are to keep alert to is all the different diseases that keep coming out. It's like, pick your disease, and it's probably impacted by vitamin D, whether it's asthma, whether it's cognitive decline in the elderly. There is now substantial evidence on almost any disease showing that vitamin D is a part of it, and we need to address that. The big new thing to me right now, again, I'm still trying to solve the world's problems, is the initiation of, to the best of my knowledge, the world's first breast cancer prevention project, as a project and as a study.
And this is a new project of
This
yours?
is a new project.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. What has been interesting to watch, even though I started with breast cancer, the whole vitamin D issue is so big. It's just like, and it affects so many things. That's where we started. And then it became clearer and clearer as I've tried to work with almost every breast cancer group around the country. I've met with them, talked with them, whatever. And there's one, it's called No Breast Cancer, KNOW, breastcancer.net, that is paying attention to prevention. But I actually had the experience of meeting with one very recently, and the comment about, I wanted to talk to them about prevention, was, we don't do prevention. And I said, how can you not do prevention? And the answer was, everybody does prevention. And I said, what are you talking about? Nobody's doing prevention. And I was told, well, everybody's doing mammograms. And I'm going, ah! So it really was with that we kicked off it's really a sub-piece of our existing project, but it's called a breast cancer prevention study. Because I guarantee you, and I know I'm sounding like a screaming whatever at the moment, but I guarantee you the women of this world care. And if the organizations haven't yet seen fit to deal with, the women will. Because all we as women, or any other person looking for health need, is give me a viable option. Give me good data, all right? And help me take charge of my health. Mm-hmm. They want to do it. So we have kicked off that study, and we are looking now for some really serious funding to support that as a major research project. But I'm very excited about it because it's back again to where the heart and the mind were with the breast cancer, and I still care about all of the other vitamin D issues. But I really felt like the breast cancer people had been deserted. And I just couldn't desert them. I mean, I'm one of them. It's just kind of like, folks, there's a way. So I've got to look for help to get the message out to people dealing with breast cancer. And
so what
that's
is
what we're doing.
What does the trial look like?
The trial is essentially identical to what we're doing now. It's just focusing on breast cancer.
Oh, so you're just
And
adding more questions? Or?
we have a few more questions, but it's still get your vitamin D tested every 6 months. Make sure you get your serum level up to the 40 to 60. And we will be doing some more analyses with Dr. Garland and some of the other scientists on the panel to publish the results specifically with regards to breast cancer.
Okay, good,
Very
perfect.
exciting.
Now, you know, some sort of an interesting question is, you mentioned the 40 to 60 a number of times, and that's pretty much the accepted
Yes.
consensus among most of the experts. But there's a question that if there's any additional benefit from like 80 to 100, and I'm wondering, you know, what your experience is, and if you can comment on, is there any, especially if you have, you know, a serious illness like cancer or heart disease or some other condition that would benefit from vitamin D?
When one looks at what are called the physiological ranges of vitamin D as from sun exposure, there really are quite a lot of people that get into that 80 to 100 range. But we don't have, at this point in time, any documented, and they're healthier than. I mean, those kind of studies haven't been done, and the populations aren't that massive. What we do have is a lot of data in the 40 to 60 range where you can actually find a research study that has somebody there that says there was a benefit. And since we have this panel of people that I wanted and I thought it was essential, and I still think it is, that they agree, all right? Those were the levels at which they would agree. I personally think, and you know, a lot of the people on our panel think it ought to be 50 to 80, and that's fine, as long as we can establish a norm so that the public doesn't have to say, well, who do I believe?
So-
all right, that's really important in a public health issue.
Sure. So there may be some benefit. It's just not known at this point.
We don't know what it is.
Yeah, because personally, I shared with you earlier, personally, that I've been able to get my own vitamin D level up to well over 100, 110, 115, just by sun exposure.
I think it's
So with
beautiful.
no oral vitamin D. So clearly, and not everyone can do that because you need enough sun exposure, and you have to be healthy. As you age, of course, the
Right.
ability to produce vitamin D decreases. So you have to have the substrate and a healthy metabolism to do that. But there may be some, I would be somewhat nervous and skeptical of producing that level through oral means, but if you're going to get it through natural means, it seems that there may be some benefit to be at that level. So, good.
Can't argue with you.
So, with your experience with mammography, I'd like to comment on a question that the National Breast Cancer Coalition recently released their analysis of a randomized trial. From a public health perspective, the harm and the public health cost of screening mammography may outweigh the modest benefits of the intervention. So I'm wondering, you know, considering your experience with this dense breasts, the fact that half the women have dense breasts that may miss a larger than golf ball sized tumor like you had, what are your thoughts on that?
Mammography is a very uncertain science. It takes, and there was another report published out of the, it's published in the Journal of the Annals of Internal Medicine in 2009, showing that for every single life saved by having a screening mammogram, it took 1,000 women to have a mammogram. So it's 1 out of 1,000, which is a very high cost for public health, all right? On the other hand, what is the cost other than just the cost of the thing? One of them is that fully 10% of those, or 100 of those women would have had what's called a false positive. They would have been told that they had cancer and they didn't. The false negatives are even worse. The percentage there is at least 15 to 20%, which means you've got another 200 women who are told you don't have cancer, but they might, right? So it's a very expensive proposition with very uncertain results. And the National Breast Cancer Coalition took a position which is pretty much it's up to you. And I don't argue with that choice, which is like if a woman wants to have a mammogram, if her doctor says, I really want you to do this, fine. But as a general screening practice, it's not particularly valuable. On the other hand, I think that it is incumbent upon us as people involved with the health of women to help them find other choices.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what else can I do? Because if I'm afraid I have breast cancer, how can I find out before you lop off my breast? I mean, there's got to be some other way.
Sure.
And again, to that one organization I talked about, NoBreastCancer.net, they have a whole series of things on their site about some possible alternatives to mammograms that I would encourage people to take a look at.
Because I believe one of the other national recommendations was that they showed, and didn't really get much media exposure, was that mammography is not recommended in women under 50 now as a routine screen. Yet, many women do get it, despite the fact that it's been proven not to be effective.
Right.
So I couldn't agree more. I think it's a freedom of choice issue,
Right.
that women should be given the freedom to choose. Somewhat similar to vaccinations. You know, I mean, there's a lot of pros and cons on it, but at least get educated,
Right.
understand the risks, the
Right.
benefits, and then make your
Right.
choice.
Right.
So Dr. Samuel Epstein has documented much of these problems in the politics of cancer. And Tom Daschle actually documented that the industry lobbying effects that impacted mammography device approval. So the medical industry has somehow painted mammography as the only option, and they consider this as a measure of prevention.
Well, there are some interesting choices out there. Again, you can see this on NoBreastCancer.net. Certainly the choices is a mammogram, a choice is thermography, and one that's coming up that I've read about recently is there's being developed a breath test. They have actually demonstrated in some trials that dogs have such a powerful sense of smell that they were 99% right in testing by breathing what a breath sample from a woman that they had breast cancer. That's what we need. We need something simple and sweet to tell us we've got it, so that then you can decide what to do next.
Yeah, we just published a video of a dog sniffing out cancer. Yeah, it was really fascinating, and it worked. You know, it just doesn't make sense to access these biological functions. If they exist, we should just utilize them. So. We started out this interview by your mentioning your struggle with breast cancer and going through the cut, poison, burn strategy. Yes. Obviously, since then, you've learned a lot with the understanding that many people watching this right now are undergoing the same process or will undergo the same process very soon or in the near future. What would be your recommendation now as a survivor of breast cancer to a woman who has just been recently diagnosed or will be diagnosed?
The single biggest thing I would recommend, the very single biggest thing I would recommend is, first of all, you, woman, have to know if you have a very aggressive growing form of cancer or if you have the 80% garden variety, which is just an invasive cancer. For the very aggressive kind, I do not have a recommendation, all right? Mm-hmm. For the garden variety kind, which is 80% of the women, the biggest recommendation I can make is take a deep breath, take your time, and get informed. Because the industry has a built-in fear to rush you through treatment options and rush you into decisions and to do things that you may look back on with great regret and which may be harmful to you. And had there been less fear on the part of the doctors, I certainly would have taken more time and I would have made different decisions.